A very good evening to all of you. My humble pranams to all those who are gathered here today. My heartfelt thanks to the organizers, especially to Praful Sejpalji and Padma Shri Krishna Kumar Warriorji. I think he's on his way here. And you're all elders here, and I'm much younger than most of you. And I take this opportunity as a privilege to be here. Let me just start off with a prayer. Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanye Trambake Devi Narayani Namostute. All right, I'll start this talk by comparing and contrasting. There's more of a contrast between Christianity and Hinduism. I'll just give you a nutshell information. Christianity's most important tenet is that you have just one birth. You just have one lifetime. A human being is born just once and he dies once. And everything that happens within this lifetime. And he's not only born once, but by birth, he's a sinner. Now, how does somebody become a sinner by birth? The first man who was created by God, we call him Adam. And Adam was alone, happy by himself. And God said, oh, this man is having a happy life. I need to give him a companion. And here comes Eve, his wife. And they were doing pretty well for a long time. And there was a serpent, and that is a representation of the Satan. And the woman is just walking around enjoying fun, and the serpent comes to her and says, hey, did you know that God told us to enjoy everything here, but he asked you to stay away from two trees. One is called the tree of knowledge, the other one is called tree of life. And he said, this God has forbidden you from eating this fruit, because if you eat this fruit, you would become just like him. You will get the knowledge to know the difference between good and bad. And then, if you eat the fruit of life, you will not die. You will be immortal. Then Eve gets excited about this. She sneaks out and tells her husband, hey, here is the secret that I found out. And then these two kind of sneak out one day, and they go. They first grab the fruit of knowledge, and then they eat. And the first thing they realize is that they are naked. And they just run and find some fig leaves and cover. And then God finds out, he comes for his evening walk rather. And then he's calling out, Adam and Eve, where are you? Then they say, hey, we found out that we are naked. We can't present yourself before you anymore. And God said, yeah, here they go. They ate the fruit of knowledge. And apparently there's a conversation. I don't know who God is conversing with, but he does converse with somebody else. And he says, now these people cannot be here anymore, because the next thing they want to go to is the fruit of life. And if they eat fruit of life, they'll become like us. So we need to get them out of here. And that's how his first creation failed. I mean, come on now. That's the first time he created somebody. Too bad, it didn't work. And Adam and Eve were driven out. Adam was cursed. And the curse that Adam got was that he has to till the ground and eat. Till now he was eating the fruits free, everything was free, but now he has to work for his food. And for the Eve, the curse is that she will be cursed with giving birth to children in pain. And of course, to the serpent, the curse was that there is an enmity between the woman and the snake forever. And thus, the first sin started. And since we are all believed to be the descendants of Adam and Eve, we are all sinful. By birth, we are sinful. So, according to Christianity, that is called the Janma Papam. You are born with the Janma Papam. So, a human being has propensity only to do evil. As the child grows, the sin in him grows. And he is not bestowed within himself an ability not to sin. There is nothing he can do to save himself. And The only salvation plan, then God just did all kinds of things from then on. He sent his prophets, he punished them, he did all kinds of things, nothing worked. And finally he decided that, oh, I'm going to send my son. Because it's believed that the fruit of sin is death. To deliver them from death, he has to send his own son as a propitiation for his sin. And remember, it is implicit in this belief that at your birth, you're separated from God. And you have this one lifetime to find your way back to God. And how do you find your way back to God? At some point, you have this dramatic experience. I never had one, for whatever reason. But suddenly, they're suddenly convicted of their sins. It could be anything from stealing 5 pennies from somewhere to murdering somebody. It could range from anything. And then they're crying, they're confessing their sins, and then they get an assurance of salvation, and from then on, they're heaven bound. Nobody can stop them. So this is the gist of what Christianity believes. Okay? There is just one way, one truth, and one life, and it is through Jesus and Jesus alone, and nobody else. If you want to be saved and go to heaven, you have to believe in Jesus. Nothing else. Nothing else works. That is the only way. And now let's contrast this with what we believe in Hinduism. I'm no expert in this, but I just found a little bit. And it says, it summarizes beautifully in the Shweta Swara Upanishad. It says, Shrunvantu Vishve Amrutasya Putraha. It says, which means that everyone in this world is integral part of the divine that cannot be destroyed. So in Hinduism, our pursuit is to get that knowledge. And once we realize that, we're enlightened. There's no psychological gymnastics that we need to do, like confess, roll on the floor, cry. None of this is there. All right, so this is kind of the comparison and contrast. And I'm going to lead you to a very famous, if you walk into any Christian house, you will see it in the entrance. That verse is, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It's a beautiful sentence at the face of it. Why would I not want my family to serve the same God that I serve? Some of us might think that it's a noble vow to make. But then we have to dig in a little bit. We have to ask, who is this God these people are referring to? What, according to Bible, is considered as serving this God? Also, what are the do's and don'ts that you need to stick to prove that you're serving this God? And the last question is my personal story. How do you deal with somebody who you thought was serving your God, but then somewhere they changed the gear and said, goodbye, I don't want this God anymore. What do I do with that person? Okay, so that's where my story comes in. In any case, I'm going to give you a good scenario that kind of explains who this God is, what are his characteristics, and what counts as serving this God. And if you don't serve this God, or if you have people around you that don't serve this God, how should you interact with them? Those kinds of things. And I'll take you to the foot of the Mount of Sinai. Okay, this is where the very first time God revealed himself to his own people. And who are these own people? They are Israelites. And if you know a little bit of history about Bible, Abraham was the first man that God chose from nowhere, and then it kept on. Then Israelites, a group of people, were his chosen people. In fact, the entire Bible is only talking about the Israelites. For him, his people are just Israelites. Nobody else exists. Everybody else other than Israelites are not children of God. In any case, the Israelites were slaves in a country called Egypt. They were slaves for a long time. And a leader comes from within them. His name is Moses. And Moses actually is adopted by the Egyptian king's daughter. Egyptian kings are known as pharaohs. And he's actually raised in Pharaoh's household. But suddenly he gets this urge to deliver his people. And yes, he goes to Pharaoh and he says, I want to take my people away from here. You're not treating them well. It's fair enough, yes. He's after he sees the luxury of the kingdom, of being in the kingdom, probably he felt like his people were suffering. So, and then he goes to and then God appears to him, and I'm not going into those details, but Moses tries to convince Pharaoh to send his people with him out. Pharaoh says, no way, you cannot go. And Moses brings 10 plagues on these people. There are all kinds of things. These plagues hurt both the crop and the cattle and the human beings. Lice, locusts, water turning into blood, cattle being killed, like all kinds of things. The ultimate one, the 10th plague, is when God says, I'm going to kill every firstborn child or son of an Egyptian family. Not only firstborn child, but the firstborn cattle. And overnight, all the houses of the Israelites were asked to be shut closed, and they were told to cut a lamb, or I don't know, maybe a goat, I don't know, whatever, but they were supposed to put a mark of blood on their doors, and when the angel of death walked in, whenever it saw the blood, it passed them, and then the rest were killed. So what does it tell us? The angel of death was walking in, but Israelites and Egyptians were next to each other. They were not separated. If they were slaves, they should have been somewhere outside, but they were living together. And that's why it was important that the angel of death knew which house was the house of Israelites. In any case, overnight there is havoc. I mean, obviously they get up in the morning, and from the son of the Pharaoh to the lowest one, everybody is killed. That's when Pharaoh says, enough is enough, you can just go, just leave me alone and go. And here is the tricky part. When they're going, they manage to convince the Egyptians to part with their gold and silver. They say, hey, we're not going too far. We're just going a little bit farther, and we're going to just worship our God and come back. And apparently, Egyptians gave their jewelry away to the Israelites. And with all this gold, silver that's collected, they just flee. And of course, they walk in the desert, and it's very hard to manage these people, because now these people are grumbling the whole time. They keep saying, oh, we were so well off when we were in Egypt, we had all kinds of food, and now you're making us walk in the desert. I don't know why we even believed you and came behind you. They're grumbling all the time. Then they come up with some plan. They said, okay, we need to do something about this. Moses is frustrated. And his father-in-law gives him some advice on how to appoint elders and all those things. Then finally Moses said, you know what? He goes to God and he prays. Moses is the only one who's communicating with God. Nobody else has seen this God. Nobody else had any direct experience with this God. But Moses comes and saying, hey, this is what God is saying. This is what God is saying. And at some point, Moses says, you know what? God has decided to visit all of you today to give his commandments. And all kind of preparation was done, and they said, hey, stand around this mount and wait, because God is going to descend and he's going to give the commandment, and he's going to talk to us face to face. But people gather around, there'll be smoke, there'll be fire, there'll be thunder, and they can only hear the voice of the God. And I want to read word for word what this God said. This is the first interaction that the people had, that this God who delivered them from Egypt is seen as. And it says, this is what they hear the very first time. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the parents to the third and fourth generations. These are the first words that the God spoke to his people. And he gives few more commandments. Then the people said, enough of this. We're just getting too scared of this God. Moses, you go ahead and deal with this God by yourself. We don't want to listen to this anymore. And Moses said, oh, don't worry about it. The God is just trying to test you all. And in any case, the people are kind of reluctant to listen to this God anymore. Then Moses says, okay, be here. Let me go and talk to God one-on-one on the top of the mountain. So Moses disappears. He's gone to get more instructions from God. And he leaves his brother Aaron as an in charge, like to take care of these people. Moses is gone and people are now happy. There's nobody to just police them anymore. And something phenomenal happens. After about maybe 2-3 weeks, I don't know, it doesn't mention the time, but they come and say, we're tired of this. This Moses has brought us here and he's left us here. Now we don't even have a God. We need a God now. I mean, that was their need. And Aaron says, what do you want me to do? I don't know what you're going to do. We need a God to lead us from here to wherever we need to go. Then Aaron said, okay, remember you got the gold and the silver from Egyptians? Give me all of it. And Aaron gets all of it. And he casts it, he puts it in the fire, and here comes a calf. And they start worshipping the calf. I mean, the night it was all done, and they were happy. Next morning, they put an altar, they're singing, they're dancing, they're just having merry, good food. And then God, who is talking to Moses on the top of the mountain, he says, hey, wait a second, I hear some noise. And somebody says it's a noise of war. God says, no, it's not a noise of war. It's a voice of happiness. People are happy. These people are stiff-necked. Moses, your people that you got here have done this, and go ahead and destroy them. And I'm going to keep you up. Through you, I will extend. I will bless you and make you a big nation. But every single one down there who's worshiping this calf has to be killed right away. Then Moses negotiates. He says, oh God, you can't do this. What will people around us say? They will say that you're an evil God and you had this preposterous thing to kill all of us, and that's why you brought us to this desert. So Moses negotiates, and he calms down and comes to the bottom of the mountain, and he has these 2 tablets in his hands where he has the commandments of God written, all of the 10 commandments like they're called. Even though Moses calmed his God down, when he actually saw the people, he loses it. He's just angry. He just takes these plates and throws them on the floor, and they're broken into pieces. And he comes and he takes the calf, melts it back, makes powder out of it, threw it in the water, and makes all the people drink that water. And Moses is still enraged to see what has happened. He demands from his brother Aaron, what did you do? I left you as in charge, and see what you have done. And Aaron said, I couldn't help. These people are evil. I mean, they come here and they want a God. What do you want me to do? So I just made a God for them. Then Moses does something very, the conversation is between Moses and Aaron. The people are not even involved. Then Moses doesn't understand how to control these people, how to stop these people from being happy. They're merry, they're joyful. And he makes a big announcement. He says, here is an announcement, whoever is for this God, come on to my side. And then a group of people come. They're called Levites. And he tells those people, you people have chosen to be on the God's side. Now do this for me. Every single one is given a sword to put on their side. And they are told to go into the camp of the Israelites. Who are the Israelites? Their brothers, sisters, children, who chose not to come to the side of the Moses. He says, go up and down the camp and kill every single person who comes in your way. And yes, they do that. Why? Because they have to prove their loyalty to their God. And that instance, it is recorded in the Bible that 3,000 people were killed. Who were they killed by? By their own brothers and sisters. This is the first recorded mass murder of what the Bible calls as idol worshippers, idolaters as they're called, which is who? which is you and me, and I'm in your camp now, so I count myself with you all. So that is the first murder. And I thought it's important to point out this information to you all because this summarizes the attributes of this God. For the rest of the Old Testament, which is 2/3 of the Bible, this God's only job is to defend his status as the only true God. Time and again, Israelites went wayward. And what did they do each time they went wayward? They didn't murder, they didn't steal. I mean, of course, they did all of those things, but the first thing they did was they found another God. Or they married somebody who was worshipping another God. And God sends prophets, God sends kings, but these people were going back to the same old ways. And that is the gist of the characteristics and the attributes of this God. And his job is to protect his godhood at any cost. And surprisingly, every time Bible mentions idol worship, it also mentions adultery. The sexual immorality is always connected with idol worship. And I don't know where that came about, but that's always. If you are worshipping an idol, it is almost given that you're sexually immoral. Okay, that's a given. And then anytime somebody chooses to forge a relationship with an idol worshiper, there are curses after curses after curses hurled on them in the Bible. And if one of your children or one of your family members goes and worship this God, they are told to kill them with stones. Okay? And this is basically the attributes of this God. And so I kind of want to start off with my So with this mindset, the present Christians, how are they relating to us? What are they looking at us as? When they look at us, what is it that they see in us? They see in us a sinner who is incapable of saving himself, and a sinner who can potentially influence their children, their young ones. So when I grew up in a church, these were the things that we were taught from the time we were. I was really not born in the church, but when I was a year old is when this drama of Christianity started in my family. But I was too young for that. And we were told not to go anywhere near the temples. We cannot eat prasadam. Behind every idol, there is an evil spirit. And this evil spirit will possess you and you will become demon possessed. Even you can't even cross the temple. Like if you were to go to school, if there is a temple on the way, you take the long route to avoid the temple. And you cannot have friends who are idol worshippers. You cannot go into their house. And once you associate yourself with idol worshippers, you will become demon possessed. And then what does a demon-possessed person do? He runs naked on the streets, and he has his hair, if it's a woman, she has her hair out, like those dramatic things that you see. So that's the picture that they gave you. And whenever they were saying these things, sometimes I would, like, even as a child, I knew something was not right. Like, what are they telling me? Because every time they attributed this to an idol worshipper, I would think of my friends in school. They were good people. And sometimes I would feel like, you know what, I need to get up and scream and say, you people are telling lies. But then I remembered, then they'll say that I'm demon possessed, so let me shut my mouth. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things. And they told us, before every festival, we had this pep talk. During festivals is the time when the devil is very active. And Kali, who is worshipped during Dasara, she's a bloodthirsty god. She's trying to get you. And you need to be in prayer all the time. And before Diwali, we were told, the people whose hearts are filled with darkness are celebrating the festival of light, and we can't be near them. Ganesh Chaturthi, this god is even terrible. because this God has an elephant head and he's grotesque and he can bring great calamities. And after Vinayak Chauthi, apparently somewhere in Gujarat, they had around that time they had an earthquake, and here is, see, they just finished their 10 days Puliya Chaturthi, and here is great calamity fell on them. And I mean, the more they demonized God, the Hindu gods, the more terrified we were. I mean, we wouldn't even make an attempt to know, okay, what is it that you all do? So I grew up like this till I was probably 13, 14 years old. And we live in what was called as a Christian bubble. What is a Christian bubble? Your friends are Christians, your neighbors are Christians, your teachers are Christians, and you never go anywhere outside these Christian circles. And once you become a part of this Christian bubble, there is no movies, you can't watch movies, you can't watch TV, you can't read novels. Everything is censored, everything is scrutinized. So in this Christian bubble, when you live, you really don't know how to relate to the people outside. And something happened around when I was probably 13, 14 years old. My parents had to vacate the house that they were living in overnight because somebody in their house died. And we had to find a house in a hurry. And when they found a house in a hurry, this happened to be in a hardcore Hindu neighborhood. And my first interaction with any genuine Hinduism started there. And I had two neighbors. I mean, I wish I can go back to them now. They would be happy to see me like this. Their families, they were fabulous people. They were such genuine people. And they would tell me about, that's the first time I heard about yoga, meditation, and all of those very nice things about Hinduism. Probably those were the ones who put some seeds about Hinduism in my mind, about Hindu Dharma. And of course, it didn't do much because they would tell me enough for me to have some kind of interest. But then there was enough bombarding in the church where it didn't matter much. It's like, okay, for every one word that they said, there were 10 words that would negate it. But it was still there. I would still listen to them. Just around that same time, I had a Telugu teacher in school. Her name is Gayatri. She was another fabulous force who taught us about various Hindu things, like with little stories she would tell us. And this combination, I think, was the seeds of real Hindu. I mean, I knew more Hindu stories than other Hindus around me, like about Mahabharata and things like that. And of course, my father knew something was not okay with me because I had too many Hindu friends. But then he knew that he also, there is another incentive to having Hindu friends because eventually I can win them all to the God, right? So probably he thought it was an opportunity for him to win people over. But I used to bring them home, and my parents are fabulous hosts. Anybody who comes home, any time of the day, our kitchen is open. When I initially got married, my husband would say, "Is this a shatram or what?" This is like people come and knock on your door, and any time you open, you have food to offer. I mean, did they call you that they're coming? I said, no, they didn't. But these were genuinely nice people. But this goodness of my parents was exploited by the church, because the only favor that my father asked in return for all the help that he gave was, come to church, listen to God's word, God will speak to you. And he was a government employee. He retired as a superintendent engineer. He's no dummy. He's a highly educated man. But his one and only goal in life was to win more souls for God. He helped numerous people, and these people were placed in good jobs. And once they were settled, he helped them till they got their jobs, and they were scattered all over Andhra Pradesh. Once they were settled, he would knock on their doors. Oh, we want to conduct Sunday morning prayer. For those people, my father coming and knocking on their door was equal to God knocking on their door. They just opened their doors, and then slowly he would start with 2 people, 3 people, 4, 10. In a matter of time, they would have 100 people. Then there will be a church built. And that's how the communities grew. And all they need were 5 people like my dad to create a mighty army. And my father was one of them. So he was a very important man in the church because of what he did. And he traveled every Saturday night. He left home. Saturday night he was on train to go set up a church in some place or preach. Saturday night he would take the train back and come back Monday morning. He's done this as long as I've remembered. And the wife can be sick, the children can have exams, nothing mattered to him. He had to go to that church because he had to serve God. That was his way he served God. While this was happening, Jay Kumar's younger sister and I were classmates. And this was in a college called St. Francis Degree College. And I kind of knew more about the in-depth Hinduism from her. And unfortunately, we lost her to an accident. And that's how, after that, I got married to Suresh, which is Jay Kumar's younger brother. And when I got married, Suresh formally came and asked my dad, I want to marry your daughter. My dad said, Suresh, do you know that we're Christians? How dare you come to my house and knock on my door? He said, no, uncle, I know you're a Christian, but I'm going to take good care of your daughter. And he said, I have nothing against you. And the only thing that I have against you is that you're not a Christian. And he turned to me and he said, Amma, I want you to obey God. And it's your choice whether you want to marry him or not. But if you let go of him because you want to obey God, and you turn to me and say, Dad, I've done this for you, and you need to find me somebody good enough. I can't do that. I can't find somebody better than him for you. But still, he's not a Christian, so that's the only reason I'm not going to allow you to marry him. And then we decided to have a registered marriage. And we just had 3 guests, and I got married. Because at that point, I was still very sensitive to the fact that I didn't want to get a Hindu marriage because I didn't want to hurt my parents. And then we came back home, and they invited back. And my father has a huge family. They all came around, and they said, hey, this boy seems like a decent boy. What do you have against him? Let's host at least a reception for this young couple. Believe me or not, when he decided that he wanted to host this, the church sent goons to watch what was happening in our house. My father got directives and said, it's okay if your relatives want to conduct the reception, but make sure that you and your wife are not anywhere around. My mother cried. She said, no, I can't do that to my daughter. Excuse me. And we told our parents, it's okay, we'll be fine. This was 20 years ago. And for the past 15 years, even though I knew that there was something drastically wrong with church, just to please them, just to keep the sanity of the family, I would tell Suresh, hey, my parents are visiting me, and there are idols in the house, and they would not like it. He would say, no, that's okay, Mary, we'll put it aside, and when they go, we can come back. And seeing Jay Kumar here hurts me because he would want to take my children to the temple, and he would want to raise them in this culture. But my only fear was, I'm going to lose my parents if I do this. And I had 2 younger brothers. I was so worried that the church would devour my younger brothers. And I told my brothers, I will take care of you both to make sure that you don't become pawns in the hands of this church. And because my father always wanted to find the girls only from that church and nothing else. And even though everybody knew that I married a Hindu, both my brother's wife were the girls that I chose for them. I would go and tell the people, and they would say, hey, your dad is a Christian, like, why is he not coming? I said, no, he won't come because why is he not the first one to make this phone call? And he would say, I would say, no, my father is in this typical church, it's like a cult, and thank you. So even though I knew that what I was in was not the truth, I just kept going with whatever I had to do, just status quo. Appear like I was a Christian, appear like everything, like whenever they came, we took them to church, like everything that would keep them comfortable. Then, just 5 years ago, the church unleashed one last weapon on us. My parents are happily retired. My mother is a sickly woman. And one night, my father gets a phone call and says, hey, here is a church in a place, and you've been wanting to serve God for a long time, because my father was kind of punished because of what I did, and then they wanted the control of my brothers that also was not handed over to them. So the church kind of put him on a low pedestal, even though he did so much. But he was still very desperate. For him, if you have to serve God, you have to be part of that group. So he was very desperate. Looks like he did go and pleaded with them that he be allowed to preach and become in charge of a church and things like that. So yes, my father, he got a phone call saying that, okay, you can go here and this is your church, you can take over. And without consulting my parents are the kind of people who call me and tell me, hey, we had to go to the doctor today. Like, I would know every single detail about them. Where they went, where they ate, like that's how much we cared for our parents, especially my mom. I mean, I never lost sight of my parents. That's how much I cared for my parents. We didn't know. He just took his bag and left. And my mother is calling me and crying. It's like, what do I do now? Dad wants to leave and go. I said, what do you mean he wants to leave and go? No, they gave him another a center, an in charge. He's become an in charge now. He has to go and take over that church. I said, and he wants to move to that place. It's not far. It's 120 kilometers from where Hyderabad was. But still, my mother was scheduled to have a knee surgery. They just visited me, and they went back to India after a 6-month trip, and in 2 months' time this happened. And yes, after that, he was like, I don't recognize my dad anymore. He's not the father that I had anymore, because that changed everything for him. And of course, I struggled. I went to the church because these are the people, even though I didn't have direct connection with them, these are the people that I knew. So I said, hey, why are you doing this to my parents? My mother is a sickly woman. She can't do this at this age, and it's hard for her. And they started abusing to an extent that they would preach, like something like this would be a stage for them to call us terrorists, to call us heathen and demon-possessed and all kinds of things. And as long as I fought that particular church, my brothers were with me. But then the next logical thing for me was to examine Christianity as a whole one last time. Because I called the lady who is the de facto leader of the church, and I told her, what you're doing to my parents is not the right thing to do. And she said, did you know that in Bible it is written that Jesus did not come to give peace? He actually brought sword. I said, this lady is blabbering something. I don't think Bible says that. And she gave me and she said, if there is strife, if there is war in your house today, that is the proof that your dad is truly serving God. I said, wow. And that's when I dusted the Bible and I read it from back to back several times. And it's like, oh my God. 35, 40 years of my life was just wasted trying to defend this God who is defenseless. And my path started, and I started talking openly about it. Now, I have nobody. My brothers are against me. My mother, she struggles to keep up, but still, because now I'm not just against the church, but I'm against the very God. I'm against the very Christianity. In any case, I did find the courage in me to come open. To me, it would bother to come put bottu and come because that would hurt my parents. And seeing me with the bottu is like the ultimate thing that devastates them. But I had to know at some point that yes, I'm done with this hypocrisy. I just cannot act one way in one place, another way in another place. And I think when they first saw me with bottu, that's when they said, okay, no, this is not my daughter anymore. So, which is okay, that's fine. And last July I was here, and I just wanted to know because I don't know any ancestry. I don't know anything about my grandparents. There were some stories that I gathered, that I observed, and I wanted to know, like, where do we belong? What are our origins? Like, did we have any Hindu ancestry? And things like that. And yes, I connected with the pujari in my father's village. And he told me so many things. And when he told me those things, that's when I remembered that, yes, we had a very rich Hindu culture. And my grandmother was called, in Telugu, we call her Pedda Muttaidu, which is the elder Sumangali of that village. And she was a woman who kept the fire alive forever. Like her kitchen fire would not go out. And women would come and light the fire from her kitchen. She was somebody like that. And she always wore bangles that were from here to here. And these are the images that came back to me as during my childhood, when they were really not completely converted, because my father did manage to convert most of them. He fought till the last element of Hindu symbolism was gone, like everything. So I kind of recollected most of those things, and I realized, oh, and they told me that as long as your grandmother was in the Hindu culture, there was a temple in this place, and she would be the one who would participate very well, and she was the one who would organize all kinds of things. But after she's gone, this village has been open to conversion. There are 11 churches in this small village of 4,000 people, and they have some temples, but those are all in very bad condition. And a group of 10 people are struggling to build a temple. They just started a temple, but they could not finish it. And I said, oh, okay, then let me go ahead and help. So last 3-4 months, I've been helping to build the temple. Kind of, I did whatever I could. I raised funds, and I put some personal money, and this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the Pratishta of the temple is happening. It is the Durga Amman. It's called Mutyalamma in Telugu. So she's supposed to be the Grama Devata of that village. So after 40 long years, there is going to be a Hindu reinstate in that community, at least. Of course, in the broader village, there are some other temples, but for this particular community, they didn't have any temple at all. And this is the one that broke my father's back, and he feels that I'm doing it to spite him. And he's very upset. He doesn't, I've been with them. I first landed in Hyderabad and came, but he just cannot get past this. He says, he's not a man given to harsh words, but I've seen the harsher side of him. And he said, at some point, I'm going to be driven mad because all his prayers have to be answered. And if his God is true in my lifetime, I will get the punishment that I need to get for it, which is what, I mean, it's not, I share these things for you all to know who is our enemy. Okay, it's not for me to wash my dirty linen in front of you. That's not my intention. I would not do that to my family. But on the path of dharma, it's important to tell the truth. And this is the truth that many of you may not be aware of. The most foolish thing to say is all religions are the same and everything leads to the God. No. It is never reciprocated. It is seen as a sign of weakness. Only imbeciles say that all religions lead to the same God. Don't ever fall into the delusion. Don't ever lose sight of your children. If your children are studying outside in hostels, that is the place where the vultures hunt. Most of the church communities are built by one or two people. We used to have what are called as children's retreat. We used to have what are called as youth retreats. These were typically held in big towns. The youth retreat that I'm talking about happens in Madras. And the children's retreat happen in big towns. And there's 3 holidays, like they choose 3 holidays. Pongal was typically the time. And people from the nearby villages, small towns, they think that it's an opportunity for their children to go see a big town. Like, oh, my children are going to Hyderabad. And that's why they send them. Those 3 days were horrendous. Back to back. Like you send a child, probably if you're a Hindu child, you go back home and you're scared to even enter your house. That's the kind of brainwashing that happens. And I would look at those people. They came as 12, 13 years old, and then maybe 4 or 5 years later, they ended up in the church's hostel. They came here to study. They were nurses, some of them were doctors, some of them were engineers. And I say, hey, I remember seeing her somewhere. Yes, they were recruited when they were 12, 13 years old. And from then on, the church kept track of them. And when they were professionally qualified and ready, they finished their college education. Instead of going back to their parents, they came and lived in the church hostel. When the parents came to visit them, there were people, they couldn't talk to their daughter one-on-one. They would have goons around to monitor what's happening. I have seen girls getting married all by themselves. Not a single family member attended the marriage. I have seen the same thing happen to boys. And these are not my figment of imagination. I have seen it with my own eyes. I told my dad one day, you were part of this church, and here you could not see the marriage of your only daughter because karma came back to hit you. Because as much as you loved me, as much as you like your son-in-law, you in your lifetime could not see your only daughter getting married off because you were part of a system that broke families. And I mean, he cried and things like that, but that is the truth. So the reason I'm telling you this is because please be watchful. The enemy outside comes very stealthily. And I'm not trying to scare you away, but keep your eyes open for every single conversation of your children. Find out who their friends are. Find out what kind of literature they're reading, especially 17, 18, and 19-year-olds. That is a very vulnerable time because we are trying to teach them to be strict. We are trying to force them to follow a tradition and trying to teach them. That's when those forces are even active. And I think I kind of covered most of the stuff that I needed to, and I'm open for any questions that you might have and anything else that you want to know that I can expound on.